Welcome to Fiber MB, a podcast highlighting non-binary fiber artists in a world that primarily thinks of fiber arts as feminine crafts and always seems happy when there are men in it, but forgets about the non-binary individuals. Today on our podcast, I'm interviewing me. I am Imriel Bisnet. I run Radical Cat Creations on Instagram and Facebook, as well as Ko-fi. Don't do too much on Ko-fi, but technically I'm there, so I'm telling you about it. You know. So my name again, Imriel. My pronouns are Z, XE, and they. I am 37, almost 38. By the time you hear this, I may be 38. My birthday comes 11 days after this episode will drop. My gender is, I like to use the term non-binary, the generalized term. If we really want to dig into it, probably a demi-boy, but boy B-O-I as the culturally specific Black gender identity. And my fiber art of choice, well, let's just say I've done a lot. I've dabbled in many fiber arts. If I learn about it, I basically dabble in it. So my main ones are cross-stitching, usually on 16 to 18 count. So none of that amazing petite point on the 40 count. For those who don't know, that would be stitches per inch is what the count is. So 40 teeny tiny stitches per inch. I cannot imagine the size of the needle for that. The one that I use at 16 and 18 count already seems tiny enough. I also knit occasionally, not as frequently as I used to. And I crochet, so I make like amigurumi for the most part, which are little stuffed animals, and like dolls and stuff, basically just cute little stuffies of things. So those are my main ones at the moment. On the side, I dabble in general embroidery, so I enjoy black work a lot as something just for funsies. I occasionally shuttle tat. Gotta do a little more practice on that one. Get in there. And then I just pick up things here and there. I've tried Tunisian crochet. It was hard on my wrists, so unfortunately I don't think I can continue it. And can't say that I haven't thought about null binding too, which is kind of like a cross between crocheting and sewing. It's really interesting. So if you haven't heard of null binding, you should check it out. And yeah, that was a little bit of a ramble. I'm sorry. We will see that I am a bit of a rambly person, and as I am recording this episode, I have already previously recorded, I believe, 5 episodes that will come out after this one, so I have tried very hard not to go too in-depth on myself while talking back and forth on the other ones, but I apologize if anything gets repeated in the next episodes. So, let's start my self-interview. When did I first begin, or how long have I been doing my arts? So the first one I remember doing, I wanted to learn how to knit. And the reason that I wanted to learn was because my mother's not a big crafter, but, she got the bug to do the baby layouts. So that would be like a blanket, booties, a hat, and a cute little sweater. And I want to say I was 7 or 8 when she was making them. And I don't know. It just looked really cool. So I wanted to learn to do what my mom was doing. And I didn't pick it up really strongly. Of course, I tried with, the scarf where it doesn't really matter, just the knit stitch. And it didn't stick too much. But then when I was 21 years old, I believe I was, an online friend of mine had started knitting hats and posting videos of them, or posting pictures of them. Sorry, we didn't really post a lot of videos back in those days. This would have been pre-YouTube. So there wasn't a lot of video uploads in places. So a trans masculine friend of mine who I believe was in California, if I remember correctly, he had started knitting hats. And I was like, I kind of want to get into knitting. So, I did the thing. I went to Michael's and I picked up some yarn and some knitting needles and I started. And my first project was a bit of a disaster. I was sure that there was no way I was ever going to be able to knit. I had already at this point realized that I had some wrist problems from a job that had spent a lot of time on computers. And it turned out that I was doing, I can't remember if it was my knit or my purl stitch the wrong way, but I was doing it in this weird twisted way that made the stitch really tight on the way back. And so it was really hard for me to manipulate those stitches, and it strained my wrist. And so I wasn't sure that I was going to be able to keep this up. And the thing that got me to continue was actually my grandmother had kidney health problems. And so she needed dialysis. And my mom told me that because of the dialysis, part of the blood that is supposed to be in her body was in a machine being cleaned. And with it out of her body, she was getting chilly because, she didn't have enough blood flow for that period of time that she was hooked up. And so she would bring a comforter with her. And it was big and awkward and, kind of hard to carry around. So I got into my head to knit her a shawl. And I made it out of alpaca because I figure, they live far north. They're so warm. Not far north. Far elevated, up on mountains and stuff. And I was like, that yarn has got to be nice and warm. And I tell you, this was just the cheap Michaels stuff. I don't even remember what brand it was now. Might have been Bernat. I am a person who runs hot. I like to be warm. And I would still have to sit in a way that my legs weren't together because as I knit the shawl, having it settle on my lap would just make the hottest little patch. And I couldn't. I needed to get this off of me. My nan loved it, said it was perfect. It was nice and warm for her, but it was also very light and not as bulky as the quilt she had been trying to take back and forth. My mother still has it currently. After my grandmother passed away, I think about 2 years after that had happened, I asked my mom where it was because my mom had donated a bunch of her clothes to a women's shelter, and I would have been okay if it went to, but so I was curious. But no, my mom has it folded up, sitting on the tiny rocker from my childhood in her bedroom. And so that started me on knitting. I tried very unsuccessfully over several years to figure out crochet. I didn't figure out crochet until I was 26, somewhere around there. I don't know, I just couldn't keep it in my head the way that you were supposed to do it. And then eventually, it just clicked. I just figured it out. I think part of my struggle was that I didn't understand UK and US terms were different too at the time. And so that was definitely a struggle at first. But I got it figured out, and we're going good now. Granted, because I do mostly amigurumi and not flat things, it did take me a while to figure out how to make things square, because it's harder to miss a stitch when you're going in the round because nothing's really pulling over on the side kind of thing. So it took me a little bit to figure that out, to start doing flat things. After that, I picked up cross stitching because I do vending at different conventions and stuff, and my hometown has a board game convention called March to Oblivion. So there's a September edition of it and a March edition, and one's just kind of a mini con and the other one's a full weekend. And so I had signed up for the full weekend one, and the person beside me cross-stitched, and I was like, that is so cool. And cross-stitch just lends itself very well to pixelated art, which is a favorite of mine. I can't say it's not. I grew up on the old games and stuff. I grew up on Pokemon, on Mario, all of the original 8-bit, 16-bit, 32-bit games. So just having this art that it would translate to really well got me, and that's what I started with. My first piece is a Pikachu. He's not the prettiest Pikachu. His threads are very bumpy and not in the best order, but you know what? I completed him, and that's all I care about. And I kept cross-stitching, and I kept picking up things, and I kept finding people doing really cool, more modern takes on this that really fit into the kind of thing I wanted to do. And so, like, as time's gone, cross-stitching's become more of my main thing. And I think it's in part because of the ease of, like, mobility. Like, I can tuck all that into a little bag pretty easily. And, you know, like, you can throw a kit together pretty quickly. It's honestly a fairly cheap project to start with, you know? If you want to, like, DMC thread in Canada is not too expensive. You can start with dollar store, you know? It's going to bleed a little, but you're going to learn your basics. And honestly, through the years, I found most of my threads thrifting. And my boxes that hold thread, I have no idea how many threads they hold. But, like, I have 11 boxes of thread now, and a vast majority of that has come from thrift stores. I also look for fabrics and stuff there. I have found a full tube of Charles Craft Ada. It was... I held on to that thing like gold, I tell you, until we got out of the thrift store. But yeah, I found that cross-stitching is something that you can actually find a lot of stuff in your thrift store, at least in the area that I'm in, so that's been great. And yeah, so let's see, what other things? Embroidery I picked up because a friend of mine in our town, there had previously been some friends of mine who opened a sex shop, and then another friend of mine partnered with them. She wasn't my friend at the time. We became friends through this workshop she did, but she had partnered with them to do some sex positive embroidery work. So I learned how to embroider a cute little paddle with a heart on it. And that was my first embroidery piece. And yeah, it was just... all the different stitches and everything were so fun. I am still kind of overwhelmed by the amazing stuff that you can do with embroidery. My embroidery is extremely basic, I will admit that. But yeah, I pick that up occasionally to do decorative hoops for the most part. And then with tatting, I picked that up because Facebook, just for once, the algorithm showed me the right thing. I know we all have a hard time with Facebook and how the algorithm just likes to show us the most random stuff that we did not have any interest in. But for once, Facebook delivered to me. And I found Sparrow Spite's tatting group. So luckily for me, the algorithm just happened to work out and showed me Sparrow's Facebook page, and I was so interested. I had heard of tatting previously in my early 20s, and the reason I'd heard about it was because I was over at a knitting friend's house, and I was crocheting something to become an earring, Pokeballs, actually, and I was using like a really small needle, and her husband came home and he saw what I was doing and he's like, oh, that reminds me of that thing that we had seen, and it was needle tatting. And I haven't tried needle tatting at this point, but I've learned shuttle tatting through Sparrow's videos. Sparrow has the Patreon that has all of the old videos uploaded that you can get access to. And yeah, I've learned amazing things through there. I've seen amazing things. And spoiler alert, but Sparrow Spite will be our July 15th drop. Yeah, so just some of the works in there are just so amazing and could be anywhere between so tiny and delicate to something that feels so much more substantial and solid. And yeah, like I said, at some point I had tried Tunisian crochet and it just didn't work out very well because of my wrist. It was just kind of hard on it. So yes, that was a really long-winded way of me saying I have a lot of things. I like to learn new things hands-on. I've also tried learning how to do drop spindle and weaving. You know, I tried them. I did them. I don't know if I'd keep up with them ever. I would enjoy keeping up with weaving, I think, on a tabletop or a floor loom, but I just don't really I don't have the push to use the end product, I guess you could say. So I would basically just make things and then like give them away. I wouldn't cut the fabric and make something like clothing or something like some people I've seen. I've also, of course, tried friendship bracelet making. Haven't we all? I had a short period where I had to go back into it when we adopted our puppy in 2021 because he was a snippy little bitey boy who kept trying to grab my hands, and I didn't want him to get my cross stitch needle. So I figured if I just made knots with thread, if he bit the thread, worst case scenario, he swallows it and I have to pull it out later. A lot less dangerous than my needles. So I feel like my next question is, how did I start? Who taught me and how did I learn? But I feel like I've already covered that pretty well. At this point in life, the great thing is there's so many videos online for free for a lot of things too. You just kind of have to find the person who teaches the way that you like, because I find some videos for stitches, like for knitting stitches, are really slow for me. So you just kind of have to find what you like. I've also learned through books. Books that I found really useful are the Teach Yourself Visually series, because not only do they have lots of great pictures, the pictures are also in color, so they're much easier to interpret, because I find that some books that have pictures for you are in black and white, and sometimes that can be a little hard to quite understand what's going. I prefer videos or in person because sometimes I find pictures they miss a step that I needed to see, and so I don't understand how you got your yarn, your thread, whatever from there to there. So generally I prefer videos, or if I can, I like to be in person with somebody else, because one of the best things about learning in person is if you mess up, somebody's there to help you fix your mistake. And sometimes that means you cut it off and you start over, and that sucks. But sometimes that means, okay, so this is what a drop stitch looks like. Okay, this is what a twisted stitch looks like. Okay, you skipped over one bar too far when you put your thread back down. And it's great to have somebody be able to explain that for you and back up through it, so that you can see how you did that and how you fix it. Next question is, what is my favorite thing about my media? So I think one of the things that I really enjoy the most is I'm a very tactile person. I enjoy touching things and manipulating things with my hands. Unfortunately, like I said, I do have wrist problems, so there is a limitation on that. I am aware that someday there's definitely going to be a point where some things just I'm not going to be capable of them anymore. And so for now, I'm going to make stuff. And I just like doing things with my hands, and it helps keep me more focused. This year, late last year, at the end of September or start of October, I learned that I have ADHD. I have gone 37 years without any sort of treatment. So it hasn't been terribly impactful, but it's been good to realize why I do some things. And because of the ADHD, I focus best when my hands are active. And thankfully in university, my teachers also noticed that. And because my mediums were very quiet, they didn't mind me cross-stitching in class, or for one class I was even lucky enough to turn in a crocheted shawl as part of my class on religion and healthcare or health. I was lucky enough to crochet a shawl that related to my friend's symptoms for myalgic encephalomyelitis. I'm sorry if I've pronounced that wrong. It's previously known as chronic fatigue syndrome, which is also the way that some people use it. So for my class, I was able to produce a prayer shawl that had stripes in relation to the severity of her symptoms. And so it's gonna be turned in. Why can't I work on it in class? But yeah, that's something that I just like, is that because of the media that I do, some of them I don't have to look. If I'm knitting or tatting, for example, for the most part, I don't have to stare at my hands because I've gotten enough muscle memory that I know what I'm doing. And I only need to look for more complicated things, or for like needing to gauge the length of something. And so it's really helpful to keep me focused on things and get me to be able to retain memories better, because I can connect my memory of a thing to the project I was working on. So if I look at my project and I try to think of like how I was feeling as I worked on it, my memories come back a little better. And that's why I like to handwrite my notes in class, but because of my wrist problems, handwriting really wasn't an option, unfortunately. I think I got like my first year done and then my hands were just too sore, and typing just doesn't get that connection as strongly for me. And I am not a person who really makes things to keep them either. I'm very much just a maker. I very solidly fall into the I want to be making a thing category, which also means that I end up with a lot of things at the end that I need to finish off, because that is no longer making, that is finishing, and that is a different category, and my brain says that's for later. So am I part of any fiber arts groups, in person or online? I've been part of some different ones through the years. I was part of a knitting group when I lived in my hometown and was in my early 20s, and it was very lovely. At the time, I didn't realize that I was non-binary, so I always kind of knew I was a little bit of out of place with the group of women that I knit with anyway, but, part of me attributed to the fact that I was younger than a lot of them. One person actually had a daughter who was only a couple of years age difference from me. So, a lot of these people were a bit older, and I just kind of attributed to that. Everybody was really kind, so I enjoyed being there. It was all women. I don't think a guy ever showed up for these when I was there. And as I've moved for university when I was 28 to a place in Nova Scotia where I'd previously lived in New Brunswick. And the university that I go to, the population of students makes up roughly a third to a half of the population of the town when the university is in session. And nearby, there's a small yarn shop down on Main Street, and they gear classes towards students. And they have a knit night, or, general fiber arts. No one's going to get mad if you don't bring knitting. And they've been really lovely, very sweet, extremely open. When we first got here, I was a bit nervous about it because I had not had great experiences in small yarn shops in my hometown, aside from the one that was owned by somebody who was in my knitting group. And so I was just a little frank about it. I was like, I'm sorry, I appreciate that you've offered for me to hang out, but I just am not comfortable because I haven't had good experiences. And the person at the counter was extremely understanding and very sweet, and, offered for me to come anytime. That was fine. And every time I've dropped in, it's been like that. It's been great. It is primarily women, from what I can tell when I've been there. There have been times where I've been there and there have been some trans-masculine people as well, which has been great. So it's very open and very, very friendly. The people who work at the shop are very, they skew younger in the population. I'm not saying they're in their 19, 20-year-olds, but for the population of people that generally you think of in knitting groups, they do skew younger in their late 20s and early 30s. And they've all been very open and very sweet people. So I've had really good experience that way. When I do go to fiber arts groups, I do tend to just assume that it will probably be women. I will have to try and figure out if I am comfortable enough to open myself up to these people and tell them that I'm non-binary, and I don't want them to call me she, her, or to call all of us ladies. I've had that just last week. As of this recording, actually, I went to a class for shuttle tatting, because I like to be in person, and I've had a little struggle with my tension, so I would like to have somebody in person help me with it. And so I went to a new course that started nearby. And when I got there, everybody in the course was significantly older than me, it seemed. And there was one more person who was going to be participating, and when they arrived, they were around my age and also had a lip piercing like I have. So that made me feel more comfortable. But it's still ladies and girls. Thankfully not extremely frequently, but yeah, we'll see. Online, I have been part of many different groups, and I've just found that I'm over how female dominated those groups are. That's why I started the non-binary fiber arts group, because I think it was 2019. I was just sick of every friggin' post being like, hey ladies, hey girls. And so I said, fuck this. I'm over this bullshit. And I just started a new Facebook group. I was like, we're not playing that gendered bullshit here. We're not going to be assuming that everybody here is women or men, because when I corrected them, they'd be like ladies and gentlemen. I'm like, cool, I'm still not included. So the main purpose of non-binary fiber arts was spite. Spite and irritation. And now it's grown into a great little group. I think we have 3,500-ish people. It is a bit of a quieter group, but I love that when people post their projects, there is some nice conversation about it. Everybody's friendly and helpful. I like that we have places where we can post our pride project and not worry about what people are going to say. If I post something that has the non-binary flag, or if I post something that is a pride flag, I don't have to worry that somebody's gonna come up and ask if I'm like, one of those weird people or something. I like that we all have the space that we can exist in together and we can help each other. And now I've been trying to trim down my Facebook groups, as I'm sure many of you know. You just get into them and then the algorithm doesn't show them to you anymore, and you don't realize how many groups you're in. And I don't know if it's just me, but Facebook has changed in a way that I'm not even entirely sure where I see my list of groups anymore, because I remember used to be able to see a list and go through and trim them out. But now when I join groups, I'm checking rules and making sure that you have something in there that's going to be pro 2S LGBT, etc. You're going to be pro gender people, you're going to be pro sexuality people, you're going to be pro sex work, you're going to be pro, you don't have to be pro sex, rub it in everybody's face, because I like our asexuals who aren't interested in that, or other people who aren't interested in that, to feel comfortable. But I want to be pro bodies, like, why can't fat people celebrate their body and be comfortable in their nude skin? So that is one of my biggest things about it. I just want to see people comfortable with their work, and I want to see this variety of work. So those are my main fiber arts groups that I've been in. I would love to see more pop up. I am also co-chair of my local Pride. And last year, we pulled Pride together in 4 months. There was a handful of us. And one of the things that I had decided to do, I was lucky enough to have my work send me to Canada Pride in Kelowna, BC last year. One of the events that I had gone to was talking about how to do Pride year-round instead of just a Pride festival every year. And so I believe it was San Francisco Pride that put it on. And one of the things they talked about was doing an embroidery workshop. And so I was like, I really want to do that. That is something that I would like to have happen where we are. So I reached out to my friend Heather, who had done the embroidery workshop with me originally that I had met her in. And I said, how do you feel about helping me lead this? So that was one of our events last year, was that we did an embroidery workshop. We were open to everybody and, give us your pronouns, whatever. So that was part of our Pride celebration. And we have incorporated a monthly board games and craft night where everybody can come hang out, and you can play games if you want. There's plenty of games there. And if you don't feel like it, you can craft. There's lots of craft supplies. So it's great that we have that space where we can all be comfortable and free to be who we are as the kind of people we are, and know that people, if somebody calls you she or he and that's not your word, that you can correct them, and that's fine. Nobody's going to be causing a problem for you there. And if they are, they're not welcome. So, do you use your art to express yourself in regards to your gender? So again, I'm not the kind of person who makes things that I want to have in the end, but I definitely do express myself some way. One of the things that I make, like I said, I'm Radical Cat Creations on Instagram, so you can go and check out that I have a whole series of Pride heart flags. These are heart-shaped pins, magnets, keychains. I'm working on stickers too. That's going to happen soon. They're cross-stitched hearts, and they have the different flags in them. And I just love being able to, the excitement that people see. Like, I have, let's see, what do I have for genders right now? I have non-binary, of course, I have trans, I mean, even some of the sexuality ones are gender affirming too, because there's the lesbian and the MLM flag, the gay male flag. So those are very much like flags that also affirm your gender identity. I have agender as well. I have gender queer, gender fluid. I have neutrois. I have intersex. I know not everybody considers that a gender, but I'm popping that in here. I think that's it for genders right now. I do want to expand for next year. I'd hope to add demi-genders this year, but unfortunately I've run out of time. So I'm planning to do the demi non-binary, demi boy, and demi girl flags for next year, as well as we'll see what comes up. I really want to do an arrow ace flag too. I'm up to 19 flags designs right now. Other things that I've done, like, I don't know, I don't wear my things a lot to affirm my gender through that, but definitely doing them. Like, I am a non-binary person. I do not feel that I fit strongly male or female. And I don't feel like because I do fiber arts, I should be slotted into one or the other. And I enjoy the idea that I am a masculine person doing what is usually considered a feminine role, because I am still producing, I am still making, and that should be something that is accessible and available for everybody who's out there. So to me, these things are not so much gendered as they are community-based as well, because the groups that we join when we join crafting circles or knit and bitch, those are things that we do in groups with other people. And if you find the right place, that's going to be affirming to your gender too. And that's one of the best things about the crafting groups that we've started hosting through Pride, is that everybody, regardless of what they are doing for their craft, can feel affirmed in their gender. No one's going to look at you the wrong way for whatever you're doing. Nobody is going to be weirded out if you were doing a trans flag in the art that you were doing. This isn't a fiber thing, but I also do some beadwork on the side, and I have worked on a beadwork patch that says they, them in public. And sometimes, I wonder if somebody's going to be weird about it. One time, actually, the way that I met one of the other organizers for our Pride organization was that I was sitting outside on a sidewalk, cross-stitching, and they came up with their dog. And if anybody knows anything about me, if you have a dog, I will talk to you. So just saying, if y'all ever meet me in public and want to have an hour-long conversation, bring a dog. So they had walked by and I asked if I could pet their dog. And so they had seen the things that I was cross-stitching. I think I was cross-stitching a non-binary flag at the time. And they were like, oh, yeah, that's really cool. And I was like, yeah, it's the non-binary flag, because I do tell people what I'm working on, because, we exist, we're here. And they were like, oh, yeah, no, I knew what it was right away. And I was like, oh, I see you. And that's something, too, I like, is that when I do my art in public, it does flag me, essentially, to other people who are in the 2S LGBTQ community. And that is wonderful. I love the fact that we can openly show each other who we are while we're doing our art, too. So that's another way that I guess I do express myself in regards to my gender with my art, is just being able to do it in public and being able to put that out there in the world, that this is something that I'm doing and you can come join me. For all of the cross-stitch hearts that I have been making for the past, 10 plus years now, I actually don't wear any of my own pins on my back, and I should fix that, because I make them. Why can't I keep one for myself? I have so many buttons on my back. So my next question for myself: do you feel like your art or the doing of your art interplays with your gender or gender expression? Example, many fiber arts have a social identity as being for women, either through domestic practices or for higher class women's pastimes. I don't feel like it necessarily interplays with my gender. My gender is definitely something that I feel is... I have a strong sense of my gender, but what it is not super defined to me. It exists, and that's, it definitely leans more masculine, so doing things that are traditionally considered feminine is a bit frustrating for me. I am not a person who is on HRT. I'm not a person interested in being on HRT. I am lucky enough that sometimes with the right clothes and the right haircut, people just assume I'm a boy anyway. But I do get frustrated sometimes, feeling like doing fiber arts in public pins me as a woman more often than anything, because men don't knit, men don't crochet, that kind of thing. So even when you try to lean into an androgynous style and looking androgynous, I feel unfortunately that does lean you more back into feminine to a lot of people. And that is very frustrating, that sometimes I feel like I can't just enjoy my hobby publicly. I mean, I'm sorry that I'm not into woodworking. I couldn't take it with me anyway, unless I want to do whittling, which probably a bad idea with my wrist. But yeah, as far as interplaying with my gender expression, I think that's just, like I said, it's a little frustrating sometimes that the concept of you doing fiber arts kind of pushes you a little further into somebody's conception of female or what women do. And yeah, maybe one day we'll come to a place where people can just be people without people looking at how they've presented themselves and automatically pushing them one way or the other. But right now, it is what it is. What inspires me to make, or the things that I make? So, like I said, I do a lot of pride stuff. Cross-stitching is my most frequent fiber art that I do. And one of the things I like most about cross-stitch is that I feel like there is so many topics that can be brought into it, and therefore I can find something that is of interest to me. And even though it's a pixel art, there's just so many art styles that can exist within cross-stitching. So I enjoy being able to connect back to my old video gaming roots back in the day. And like I said, I do a lot of pride things, so I enjoy being able to do different flags and stuff like that. Like the variety of flags that exist, the variety of micro labels, just gives you a lot of things to try to work on, a lot of things to pick from, a lot of things to mess around with, and it's just a lot of fun being able to do that. So the things that inspire me, I'm honestly a big potential kind of person. I get very excited when I see a lot of color in a place, and that seems to be true across a lot of things. My husband and I are watching MasterChef right now, and if you've ever seen their pantry, it makes me very happy. All the things just beautifully laid out. And that's kind of how I feel when I go to a store and I see like all the fabrics and all the colors. Even for hobbies I'm not part of, I see all of these tools, I see all of these materials, and I get so excited to be able to do something with them, even though they're not mine. It doesn't matter. It's the potential that really, really gets me excited. And on top of that potential, one of the other things that inspires me, or the things that I make, is just that I like, how do I put it? You do one stitch at a time. And that's knitting, that's cross-stitching, that's crocheting, that's tatting. And all of these things pile up, and they add and add and add to each other. And in the end, you have something. You have something that is recognizably either part of your fandom. You have something that is a piece of comfort. You have something that is an example of your love for somebody else or for yourself. And that's just amazing that you get to do these things and you get to, in the end, come out with a tangible result of all of this hard work. And you get to share that with the world if you want to. I admit, I'm bad at sharing it. I am the worst for remembering to take pictures and share them online. So if you do go to my Instagram or my Facebook and you notice that there's not a lot of uploads, I'm sorry, that's just me. I promise I still use them, I'm just bad at it. So that is one of my favorite things, and one of the things that inspires me to keep going, is that I just like knowing that in the end, I'm going to do something, and it's going to be something that I put a lot of effort and a lot of care and a lot of thought into. And it's going to be either something that I'm going to gift to a person who sees that as well, or it's going to be something like my pride pins that are going to be picked up, and somebody's going to be so excited to have this little handmade piece of art that represents them. And I just love that so much. So the next question is, tell us what your favorite thing is you've made so far, no matter what it is. That's hard when I've been making a lot of things for a lot of years. So one of the things that I'm definitely going to say is my favorite is I'm going to go back to that shawl I mentioned at the start. It's a light blue, I don't want to say sky blue, I feel like it's lighter than that, fluffy, soft alpaca shawl. And, you know, it did the thing that my nan needed, and it helped her out when she was really sick. My mother really loves and appreciates it. I've been lucky enough that as much as my mother is not a consistent maker, she very much appreciates handmade things. And so that's also something that's like, it's nice to know that it went to somebody who still cares about it, both as what it did and where it came from. So that is definitely one of my favorite things, as I love going to my mom's house and seeing that not tucked away, but on display for people to see. And, you know, it's really nice to know that something I made, almost 15 years ago now, is still so appreciated and loved. I'm trying to think if anything else can really rival that. I can't really think of anything. Maybe the new shawl that I'm working on, it's called Wingspan. I cannot remember the artist's name offhand. They had a kit deal with Blue Brick Yarns back in the day. That is going to be the most gorgeous thing when I complete it. I have to admit I am dragging my feet on it because it is a complicated shawl. But once I finish that with all of those gorgeous feathers, and I can hand that to my sister and know that she's going to love it and think of me every time that, you know, she pulls it out, I'm sure that's going to go up there. And having her choose the yarn and the colors for it, and also because it is a painted yarn that goes from one color to a different one, which order she wanted the colors to fade in on the shawl. I'm gonna be really happy when she has it. I should really get on it. I started it January 1st of 2023, and I need to come back to it. It's so complicated. So I think that wraps it up on me. This episode is going to be probably just a little bit shorter than most of my episodes. I am aiming for an hour to an hour and a half with episodes with other people, but yeah, it's just me. There's no banter back and forth, so we can accept that one will be just a little shorter. And yeah, so where on the internet can people find me? Like I said, I am Radical Cat Creations, and that is Instagram, it is Facebook. I have a Ko-fi that I don't really use. I do want to pick that up more and start using it properly. Yeah, so those are the main places you can find me. I also have a link tree, and I will update things there as I go along and add and subtract the different social medias that I want to be part of. Yeah, so thank you so much. And if you'd like to find FiberNB on the internet, we are at Instagram under the username FiberNB, F like Frank, I, B like Bob, EREN like Nancy, B like Bob, Y. If you want to email me as FiberNB, it's again fibernb@gmail.com. And I have a link tree in the bio of the Instagram, or you can type in Linktree, linktr.ee/FiberNB. And on there, you can find submission forms for yourself. If you want to submit a particular person for me to reach out to for the podcast, or if you're want to just find the latest episodes, I will try to remember to keep them linked there as the newest episode drops. And I have a Ko-fi at ko-fi, ko-fi.com/FiberNB. That is just to help me fund the cost of running the podcast, keeping it uploaded, etc., etc. I'm not looking to make a big profit out of this, but if you want to throw a tip in the jar, feel free. And I look forward to seeing everyone on the next episode. Bye! Have a good day, everyone, and thanks so much for listening.